Hello, I'm Tai. Start and run a small business in Germany as an expat is not easy. This channel is a weekly education channel for all aspiring entrepreneurs and existing small business owners in Germany. Subscribe to our episodes to get an actionable advice, tips, and resources on how to start and run a small business in Germany. This channel, Fortune Fly Girl, is hosted by Tai, a certified financial advisor in Germany who has passion and professional experiences in guiding foreigners in Germany to start and run their small business, all for free. The information shared in this channel do not consider tax or legal advice or a specific financial advice. This channel is for educational and information purpose only. Handelsregister, commercial register. If you are as a matron, you're required to be entered in the commercial register as defined by commercial law. Then you should submit a copy of this current extract from the commercial register. If you have this obligation to register in the commercial register, please enter the commercial register number. Here, it consists of two parts and consists of the name of the directory in capital letters and the register number, 1 to 11 digits. For example, HRA and 123456 or VR and 123456. As a freelancer, you can skip this because as a freelancer, you don't need to register in the commercial register. Also, as a small business owner for sole proprietorship, you can also avoid commercial register because commercial register means you go to this commercial register court and register yourself officially and publicly. But for small business, sole proprietorship, or freelancers, you don't need that. So we can skip this part and go to the next part, so-called Gründungsdaten, founding data. So here you enter the form of incorporation and the date on which the activity of your company began, date of establishment. In the case of a startup, the date of establishment usually corresponds to the day on which business activity began. If there is a takeover, relocation, or conversion, the name and the address of the previous company or the previous owner, as well as the previously responsible tax office, including the tax number under which the company was previously managed, must also be given. In the event of a takeover, relocation, or conversion, please submit the relevant documents, such as contracts. In this case, there is a special case sales of business as a whole. The sales in the context of a business transaction sale as a whole to another entrepreneur for his company are not subject to sales tax. The purchaser cannot deduct unjustified sales tax as input tax. As these complicated situations normally don't apply to us as beginners, we can skip this part. So we move to next column, information on the fixing of advance payments, Angabe zur Festsetzung der Vorauszahlung. For the year in which the company opened and for the following year, please state all expected income from you and, if applicable, from your spouse or partner. For the year in which the company opened and for the following year, state all expected special expenses and tax deductions from you and, if applicable, from your spouse or partner. We move to the next point, Art der Gewinnermittlung, type of profit determination. Enter the type of profit determination. In the case of accounting, an opening balance sheet must be submitted to the tax office. In addition, the profit determination period, calendar year or different financial year must be specified. So for double bookkeeping taxation, you need to submit this balance sheet opening balance sheet to the tax office. That's applied to limited companies such as GmbH or AG or OHG as a natural person who is obligated to this double tax bookkeeping. But for freelancers, you don't need to submit this balance sheet because you are not that doesn't apply to you for this bookkeeping rule. So there are basically two ways of determining the taxable profit. First way is the bookkeeping with annual financial statements, so-called accounting, and the second way is record with income statement. If a tradesperson or agricultural operations are obligated to keep accounts under non-tax regulations, for example under commercial law, the taxable profit must be determined on this basis. Furthermore, all tradesperson, as well as farmers and foresters, whose turnover, including tax-free turnover, excluding turnover in some extent, exceeds 600,000 euro in the calendar year, or whose profit exceeds 60,000 euro in the financial year or in the calendar year, are required to accounting. The possibility of voluntary keeping books is not excluded. So, in summary, I can tell you as a small business at the beginning, you are not obligated to this double bookkeeping regulation because under the assumption that your revenue in this year and the next year does not exceed 600,000 euro, and or your profit does not exceed 60,000 euro in this year then you don't need to. But for concern, after you start your business, please find an accountant to do that for you if you don't know how to do. So there is a special point for freelancers. Freelancers can use this income surplus calculation as the simplest way of determining profits. The profit is determined in the income surplus calculation as follows. Operating income minus business expenses are profit or loss. You must assign the operating income to the calendar year in which the money was received or credited to you. You assign the operating expenses to the calendar year of the payment. The acquisition costs of long-term unusable assets, such as shop fittings, company cars, are an exception. These are distributed over the total useful life of the respective assets and deductible as a business expenses in annual depreciation amounts. The tax return must be accompanied by the income statement according to the official prescribed form, in German, so-called EUR form, Einnahmeüberschussrechnung form. Entrepreneurs are fundamentally obliged to submit their tax returns electronically using the official prescribed data record. You can find this electronic form after logging in My Elster, go to Forms and Services, and All Forms, Income Surplus Calculation. Upon request, the tax office can dispense with electronic transmission to avoid undue hardship. So, we move to the next part, the so-called fiscal year different from the calendar year. Please only enter a business year that differs from the calendar year. For example, business year that is 12 months and does not start on January the 1st of any year. The short financial year that occurs at the start of the operations during the year and which is shorter than 12 months is not to be entered. Because some business, they use another fiscal year different from the calendar year. That's why they specify another fiscal year. But for most of our cases, we can just neglect it because we use the normal calendar year for taxation. The next point is information on registration and payment of wage tax. This wage tax registration must be submitted electronically by the 10th day after the end of each registration period. According to the officially prescribed data record with the tax law, you can find this electronic form after logging at My Elster, Form and Services, All Forms, and Income Tax. Upon request, the tax office can dispense with electronic transmission to avoid undue hardship. In this case, the income tax registration must be submitted using the official prescribed form and signed in by the employer or a person authorized to represent him. This is in regard with, for example, if your company will hire someone, and as an employer, you need to file this wage tax registration for your employee. But as you know, freelancer don't hire anybody. We can skip this part. If we are freelancer or very small business don't have employee. So the next point is number of employees. Please indicate the number of all employees, including temporary workers, family members, and marginal part-time employees who work in your company. The number of employed family members and part-time workers, as so-called mini-jobbers, must also be specified separately. This is normally for existing business who have employees. If they, for example, have one mini-jobber, they should stay one. But in our cases, as a freelancer or a solo proprietorships without employees, we can just stay 0. Next point is amount of the anticipated income tax or registration period. Every employer is obligated to withhold income tax from the wages and salaries paid to its employees and to pay it to the tax office. The employer's personal wage tax deduction criterion are communicated electronically. So at the beginning of the employment relationship, the employer has the electronic wage tax deduction features for the employee at the Federal Central Tax Office, BITSST, via remote data transmission and transfer them to the employee's payroll account. For the purpose of calling up the wage tax deduction features, the employee must therefore inform his employer when entering the employment relationship that the identification number and the date of the birth and whether it is the first or further employment relationship. We all experience this. If you were an employee in Germany, you need to enter this data before the employer file a contract, right? That's like in the same way as you could be a future employer and you need to do all this stuff for the employees. So these electrical wage tax deduction features, they are used by the employer to carry out the employee's wage tax deduction until the tax office provides him with the change electrical wage tax deduction features for retrieval, or the employer notify the tax office of the termination of the employment relationship. Because this is all automatic payroll accounting, the best way to do it if you want to hire an employee is outsource this stuff to a professional provider, because it's really difficult to manage. And if you pass. If you unpurposely pass some deadline, you have to pay penalty too. So this registration period, monthly, quarterly, annually, is based on the amount of income tax that is expected to be paid in a calendar year. And the personal wage tax deduction characteristics is different based on the situation of the employee. There is a link for this wage tax calculation. I recommend not to do it by yourself, but later when you employ someone, when you hire someone, better outsource it to a provider. So for your general briefing, for example, up to 1,080 euros as estimated annual income tax, then you can submit as an employer yearly. More than 1,080 to 5,000 euros, you should submit quarterly. More than 5,000 euros, you can submit per month. The employer is exempt from the obligation to submit an income tax registration if he informs the business premises tax office that he does not have to withhold or take over any income tax during the income tax registration period because the wages are not taxed. This also applies if he only employ for whom he only has to pay the 2% flat tax to the Deutsche Rentenversicherung, the pension fund of Germany. Knappschaftbansi, this long name. Normally it's for mini jobbers. If you pay as an employer to this Rentenversicherung Knappschaftbansi, you pay the 2% flat tax. So the next point is about income tax permanent establishment. What is it? It's like the wage tax permanent establishment is the company or part of the employer located in Germany and which the wages are determined as a whole. For example, where the individual wage components, or in the case of automatic payroll accounting, the input values are summarized for the wage that is decisive for the wage tax deduction. It does not matter where individual wage components are determined, where the wage tax is calculated, and the documents relevant for the wage tax deduction are stored. So at the beginning, it's lucky to not to have employees because you can skip this part too. Next, information on registration and payment of sales tax. This part is very important. I have to illustrate more. This entrepreneur must electronically submit an authenticated VAT return. It's the form number UST1A, UST1A, up to 10 days after the end of each pre-registration period. For using Easter to submit this tax return form, you should have a certificate for Easter. So to this point, I already finished the first half of my experts episode. Please consider following our next episode to understand more about the next procedure, how to finish the second half of the form. Thank you. Hi, I'm Fortune Fly Girl. This is my channel about investment, startup, and travel. If you're an expert in Germany or Europe who wants to learn how to get startups and investment them, subscribe to my channel. My channel publishes videos that focus on useful guides and tips for startup and investment, especially for experts based in Germany. If that sounds like it could be helpful for you, please join me for a free discussion, and any ideas would be very welcome. Thank you.